It's estimated that potentially up to 60% of the construction of Machu Picchu is underground, and these deep foundations were necessary to help with seismic movements and terrace drainage to make sure things would filter properly.
Machu Picchu has amazed the world for centuries, but new research is changing everything we thought we knew about its famous terraces. For decades, experts believed they were built mainly to grow food high in the Andes, supporting the people who live there. But recent discoveries suggest the terraces were not just farms. They were part of an incredible hidden system designed to control rainwater, prevent landslides, and protect the city from collapsing down the steep mountain. Every layer of stone, gravel, and soil tells a story of genius engineering that modern experts are only beginning to understand. Could it be that these terraces were never meant to feed the city at all? Join us as we uncover these new findings. The discovery that changed what we thought about the terraces. For many years, visitors and researchers believed the wide stone terraces climbing the mountainside of Machu Picchu were built mainly for farming. From a distance, they looked exactly like the agricultural steps used across the Andes. Soil covered each level, and the stone walls held the earth in place. It seemed simple. The people of the Inca civilization had shaped the steep mountain into fields where crops could grow. That idea appeared to make perfect sense, and for a long time, it was accepted as the full explanation. But as researchers continued to study the site more carefully, small details began to raise quiet doubts. Scientists started measuring the size of the terraces and examining the soil more closely. When they calculated how much food these terraces could actually produce, the numbers were surprising. The land was not large enough to support the number of people who likely lived in the city. Even if every terrace was planted with crops, the harvest would have been far too small to feed the entire population. This meant that food must have been brought from farms in the valleys far below the mountain. That discovery forced experts to look at the terraces in a new way. If they were not built mainly to grow food, then why did the Inca invest so much effort in creating hundreds of these stone platforms along the steep slopes? Building them would have taken enormous labor. Every stone had to be carried, placed, and fitted carefully. The work must have lasted many years. It seemed unlikely that such a massive project existed only for a small amount of farming. Researchers then began examining what lay beneath the surface of the terraces. What they found changed the entire picture. Under the top layer of soil were several hidden layers of materials. Large stones formed the base, followed by gravel and sand, before the fertile soil was added on top. This design allowed rainwater to pass through the ground instead of collecting on the surface. Water could travel safely down through the layers and away from the mountain slopes. This discovery revealed something remarkable. The terraces were acting like a giant drainage system built directly into the landscape. Instead of simply holding crops, they help control water and protect the mountain from erosion and landslides. Considering that the region receives heavy rainfall every year, such protection would have been extremely important. Without careful water control, the steep slopes could easily weaken, causing the ground beneath the city to shift. The more scientists studied this hidden structure, the clearer the story became. The terraces were not just farmland. They were part of a smart engineering system designed to keep the city stable and safe on a very fragile mountain ridge. And once this idea began to take shape, another important question followed right behind it. If the mountain itself was such a dangerous place to build a city, what other clever solutions did the Inca create to make sure their incredible city could survive there for centuries? The lost Inca city built on a dangerous mountain. Long before modern engineers studied the slopes, the builders of Machu Picchu had already faced a difficult problem. The city stood high in the Andes Mountains, resting on a narrow ridge surrounded by deep valleys and steep cliffs. It rose about 2,430 meters above sea level, where clouds often wrapped around the peaks and heavy rains visited the mountains again and again each year. From a distance, the location looked breathtaking, but from an engineering point of view, it was a risky place to build anything, especially an entire city made of stone. The civilization responsible for this remarkable place was the Inca Empire, which grew powerful across large parts of South America during the 15th century. Historians believe the city was likely built during the rule of the Inca Emperor Pachacuti. Under his leadership, the empire expanded quickly, and impressive construction projects appeared across the region. Machu Picchu was one of the most extraordinary of them all. The builders did not choose an easy landscape. The ridge where the city stands is surrounded by the winding Urubamba River far below, and the slopes fall sharply on nearly every side. The ground is uneven and rocky, and the mountain sits in an area where the earth can shift over time. On top of that, the region receives a large amount of rainfall each year. When rain pours down on steep terrain, water rushes downhill quickly, loosening soil and stones as it moves. Over many seasons, that process can slowly weaken a mountain. For any settlement, this kind of environment would normally create serious dangers. Soil could slide away, walls could crack, entire sections of ground could collapse during storms. Even today, landslides are common in mountainous regions with heavy rain. Yet somehow Machu Picchu remained standing for centuries, even after the Inca civilization disappeared. When modern researchers began studying the site more closely, they realized something important. The city had not been placed on the mountain by accident. The builders clearly understood the risks of the landscape. Instead of ignoring those dangers, they carefully designed the city to work together with the mountain itself. The placement of buildings, pathways, and terraces followed the natural shape of the ridge. Stone structures were fitted together with incredible precision, allowing them to shift slightly during earthquakes without collapsing. Water channels guided rainfall through the city in controlled paths. Almost every part of the site seemed to be connected to a larger system designed to protect the ground beneath it. The terraces that stretch across the slopes were only one piece of this careful design. Their position helped shape the mountain step by step, creating stable layers that held the earth in place. But as researchers continued exploring the site, they started noticing that the terraces were only the beginning. Hidden beneath the surface and between the stone walls were signs of an even more complex system, one that suggested the Inca were doing far more than simply building a beautiful city on a mountain. They were quietly solving one of the greatest natural challenges the landscape could throw at them. And this discovery would lead scientists to ask another fascinating question. If the terraces were not mainly built to grow food, then how did people living in Machu Picchu actually feed the hundreds of residents who once called this mountaintop city home? The farming theory that didn't fully add up. As researchers continued studying life at Machu Picchu, another puzzle slowly appeared. If the terraces covering the mountain were not mainly meant to grow food, then how did the people living there survive? At first glance, the terraces looked perfect for farming. They were wide, neatly arranged, and covered with soil. Anyone seeing them would naturally assume they were fields where crops were planted. For a long time, that was exactly what historians believed. The stepped platforms resembled the agricultural terraces used across the Andes by the Inca civilization. These kinds of terraces, often called andinis, were known to help farmers grow crops on steep mountains. By cutting the slopes into flat layers, farmers could prevent soil from washing away, while also creating small areas where plants could grow. Because of this, early researchers thought the terraces at Machu Picchu served the same purpose. However, when scientists began studying the site more carefully, they decided to measure the total farming space available. They calculated how much land existed on the terraces and compared it with how much food that land could realistically produce each year. The results created an unexpected problem. The numbers suggested that the terraces could only grow enough crops to feed a small group of people, possibly around 50 or 60 individuals. But archaeological studies showed that the city likely held several hundred residents at different times. These residents may have included priests, servants, craftsmen, guards, and members of the royal court. A community of that size would need far more food than the terraces alone could provide. This meant that most of the food consumed in the city must have come from somewhere else. The valleys below the mountains were rich with farmland, and it is very likely that crops were grown there and carried up the mountain to supply the people living in the city. The Inca Empire had an advanced network of mountain roads, which made it possible to transport goods between different regions. Through this system, food from lower areas could reach Machu Picchu without too much difficulty. Once researchers understood this, the farming explanation began to look incomplete. The terraces were clearly capable of supporting some agriculture, but they could not explain why so many terraces were built across the mountain. The amount of work required to create them was enormous. Stones had to be cut, carried, and carefully stacked. Soil had to be brought in and spread across each level. Such an effort would normally only happen if the terraces served a very important purpose. This realization pushed scientists to look deeper, literally beneath the surface of the terraces. What they discovered there would completely change the way experts understood the mountain city. Below the top layer of soil, the terraces contained carefully arranged layers of stones, gravel, and sand. These materials were not placed randomly. They formed a structure that allowed rainwater to flow smoothly through the ground, instead of collecting on the surface. Water could pass through the layers and move safely away from the slopes. That discovery revealed that the terraces were doing much more than holding soil for crops. They were quietly controlling the movement of water across the mountain. And once researchers understood that hidden function, an even bigger question emerged. What would happen if the terraces were part of a drainage system? Just how advanced was the engineering hidden beneath the famous city in the clouds? The hidden engineering beneath the terraces. As scientists continued to explore the deeper structure of Machu Picchu, the mystery became even more fascinating. What appeared simple on the surface turned out to hide a carefully planned design underneath. The terraces were not just flat layers of soil sitting on stone walls. Beneath them was a thoughtful arrangement of materials that worked together like a natural filter and drainage system. Researchers discovered that each terrace was built in several layers. At the very bottom were large stones placed together to create a strong base. Above these stones came a layer of smaller rocks and gravel. On top of that was a layer of sand or loose material. Finally, rich soil was placed at the surface where plants could grow. At first, this might seem like an ordinary way to build farmland, but scientists soon realized that every layer had a very important job. When rain fell on the mountain, the water did not stay trapped in the soil. Instead, it slowly passed downward through the upper soil and into the sand and gravel layers below. These materials allowed the water to move easily without washing the soil away. The larger stones at the base helped guide the water deeper into the ground and away from the terrace walls. This simple but clever design prevented the terraces from becoming waterlogged during heavy rains. In many mountain regions, soil becomes unstable when it absorbs too much water. Wet soil can become heavy and loose, which increases the risk of landslides. But the terraces at Machu Picchu allowed rainwater to drain away quickly, keeping the ground firm and stable. The more researchers studied the system, the more they realized that the terraces were acting like giant sponges spread across the mountainside. They absorbed rainfall, slowed it down, and guided it safely through the ground instead of letting it rush down the slopes all at once. This was extremely important because the region receives a large amount of rain every year. The mountain sits within a cloud forest environment where storms and steady rainfall are common. Without proper drainage, water would collect in the soil and slowly weaken the mountain slopes. Over time, this could cause the land to shift or collapse. But the terraces changed the way water behaved on the mountain. By breaking the slope into hundreds of steps, the Inca builders slowed the speed of rainwater moving downhill. Instead of rushing down in destructive streams, the water filtered gradually through the layers beneath the terraces. Scientists also noticed another remarkable feature. Many terrace walls included small openings that allowed excess water to escape. These tiny drainage outlets prevented pressure from building up behind the stone walls. If water had been trapped inside the terraces, it could have pushed against the walls and caused them to crack or collapse. Instead, the design quietly released extra water, keeping the structures safe even during strong storms. What impressed engineers the most was how well the system still works today. More than 500 years have passed since the terraces were built, yet many of them continue to drain water exactly as they were designed to do. Even after centuries of rain, earthquakes, and natural wear, the terraces remain stable. This level of long-lasting performance shows that the builders had a deep understanding of the mountain environment. They may not have used modern scientific tools, but their experience with nature allowed them to design structures that solved real problems in a very effective way. Studies have suggested that a large portion of the effort used to build Machu Picchu was focused on what lies beneath the ground rather than what visitors can see. A great deal of the city's construction was dedicated to preparing stable foundations and managing water flow throughout the site. And once researchers realized how much hidden work existed below the surface, a bigger picture began to form. The terraces were only one part of a much larger system carefully designed to control water across the entire city. Which leads to an even more surprising realization. If so much of the engineering was hidden underground, just how extensive was the invisible drainage network that protected the entire city from the powerful forces of rain and gravity? Inside the hidden design. Even after discovering the clever design of the terraces, researchers realized that they were only part of a much larger, hidden system that kept Machu Picchu safe for centuries. As scientists dug deeper, both literally and figuratively, they found that the Inca engineers had created a vast network beneath the city to manage water, stabilize the slopes, and protect the structures from the mountain itself. The terraces were more than just steps in the soil. They were carefully crafted pieces of an enormous, invisible puzzle. Each layer of stone, gravel, sand, and soil worked together to act like a giant sponge, slowing rainfall and channeling it safely down the slopes. The large stones at the bottom formed a stable base, while the gravel and sand allowed water to filter gradually, preventing the terraces from washing away or collapsing. Tiny drainage outlets embedded in the walls released excess water, ensuring no pressure could build up and damage the stonework. Beyond the terraces, the Inca created hidden underground channels that guided water across the mountain, feeding it safely into the natural rivers below. These channels connected buildings, plazas, and terraces into a single, cohesive system that could withstand heavy storms and even earthquakes. Modern engineers studying Machu Picchu have been amazed at how effectively this system still functions over 5 centuries later. It's almost as if the mountain itself was being held in place by invisible hands, each terrace and stone wall working quietly to protect the city from nature's fury. The Inca didn't just build a city, they tamed a mountain, designing an environment that harmonized with the natural landscape instead of fighting it. Every wall, pathway, and terrace was positioned with careful thought, showing a deep understanding of how soil, water, and gravity interacted. This hidden engineering also sheds light on why the terraces weren't used primarily for feeding the city. Calculations show that the terrace fields could only provide enough food for a small fraction of Machu Picchu's residents. Most of the population likely relied on crops grown in the valleys below, transported up by the Inca's sophisticated road system. The terraces were never meant to feed everyone. The terraces also helped prevent landslides on the steep ridge where the city was built. By breaking the slope into hundreds of steps, they slowed down the movement of water and soil during heavy rains. Rainwater no longer poured straight down the mountainside in destructive torrents. Instead, it filtered slowly through the terraces, reducing the risk of erosion. Even today, engineers studying the walls and foundations marvel at how the Inca combined structural stability with environmental intelligence. Many modern safety measures echo the same principles found in Machu Picchu's terraces and drainage channels. Looking at the city as a whole, it's clear that the Inca were not just brilliant builders, they were master environmental engineers. They created a system that worked quietly and efficiently, using natural materials and traditional knowledge to solve problems that even modern engineers struggle with today. The terraces, the underground channels, the precisely angled walls, and the placement of buildings all worked together to create a city that could survive centuries of rain, erosion, and earthquakes. Machu Picchu wasn't just a home or a royal retreat. It was a testament to human ingenuity, a living example of how people can work with nature rather than against it. And yet, even with all this knowledge, the mountain still holds secrets. LiDAR scans and ongoing excavations continue to reveal new terraces, hidden channels, and pathways buried beneath the forest, hinting at the full scale of the Incas' engineering genius. Every discovery brings more wonder, reminding us that Machu Picchu was never just a city on a mountain. It was a carefully designed masterpiece, built to last. A secret world of water, stone, and soil that quietly protected its people for hundreds of years. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.